Thank you, Mark, and a big hello from London. A limited amount of weekly patterns this past week, limited to just currencies and commodities, and very limited in the number in the currency pairs, which altogether makes a change from recent weeks where we saw some large weekly and monthly patterns and moves. In the currencies, there were only 2 weekly key reversals in the currency pairs I follow, and both were weekly key reversals down. We had a weekly key reversal down last week in the US dollar Colombian peso, which has seen a suitable follow-on lower this week, down to lows not seen since January 2020. Similarly, in US dollar Korean won last week, we had a weekly key reversal down from a high last week that was close to the major high made earlier in June. And that one back then was a high not seen since 2009. So coming up to almost 2 decades ago. This week we have seen a more than suitable follow-on lower to this weekly key reversal down. Moving over to commodities, and I'll start looking at metals. And we had a weekly key reversal up in spot gold last week. However, gold has a far larger pattern operation, a late January, start of March bearish shift pitchfork pattern, as any of you who follow my daily video commentaries will attest. This is the main driver in the market, and it is for lower prices, and explains why we have seen a reactionary move lower this week, well within the main body of last week's range, and even suggesting the possibility of an immediate countering weekly key reversal down, though we haven't managed to form this pattern as yet. Next is CME Cobalt futures, which had a weekly key reversal down last week, and which this week have seen a small but nice looking follow-on lower move this week. We then have LME Steel Scrap Turkey, which had a weekly key reversal down last week, but which this week can't seem to make up its mind as prices gyrate around from last Friday's close at 376 even, seemingly unsure of whether to head higher or thrust lower. We are at this time just a little over last Friday's close. Next is Dalian Iron Ore Futures in China, which had a weekly key reversal down last week, but one that was at the lows of the market, lows not seen for at least a year. This week, with this strange duality of a bearish pattern at the lows of the market, all we have seen is prices spreading up and down and around last Friday's close. Finally, spot tungsten in Shanghai had a weekly key reversal down last week, if only just. And prices have started to follow on lower this week, making a new 2026 low and below half of what this metal traded at as recently as April. The action since April also has elements of a possible bearish halfway hesitation about it, but that is still early as yet, and if it did, it would have potential down into the low hundreds for this metal. Over now to the agricultural commodities, and we had a weekly key reversal down last week in Chicago soybean oil futures, which tied in with the recent May to early June double top pattern, as well as the monthly key reversal down seen here and in other oilseeds and veg oils. Yet this week we have seen a reactionary move back up, pushing up through the June 21 high at 70.33, which had capped last week's prices. However, the market has not stabilized up here, not yet. So just a word of caution on relying too much on this reactionary move up. More on this in my weekly oilseeds and video commentary, which is out tomorrow. Next is Chicago corn futures, which had a weekly key reversal up last week and has this week had a superb follow-on move higher. This ties in with the June-based descending expanding wedge pattern I cautioned about last week in my weekly oils and oilseeds video commentary. For this pattern, we have a primary target in the 446.5 area, an area we have almost reached, and a secondary harder to reach target, not too far above it, in the 451.25 area. More on this tomorrow in my weekly oilseeds and veg oils video commentary. Finally, we had a weekly key reversal up in Chicago lean hog futures, which had small attempts higher on Monday, but which yesterday had a reactionary move back down within last week's somewhat average weekly range, but obviously below Friday's close. One is somewhat nondescript from a technical analysis point of view. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions with anyone who's interested. And with that, I'll finish this section from London. I hope you found these comments useful. Thank you for watching and listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Tofpick and ADM Investor Services International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.